moving on to Manchester City, they are in sixth place now. They've obviously suffered with injuries, and the squad has looked quite thin. They've made a lot of noises about being active in January. Rob, do you think they're going to come through on that they are going to be proactive and sign 1, 2, 3? I mean, how do you think they'll get on?
The expectation is that they will bring someone in. They're obviously looking for a number 6. That's their priority. There has been talk of sort of 3, 4 players that they're downplaying that element of it. They're sort of suggesting that if show me a team that has ever been able to make 4 top quality signings in January, it's just not possible. While they're not sort of downplaying the fact that they need help in midfield, they are downplaying that you can do an awful lot of business, particularly in January, because it is such a hard market. They've been linked with, they've looked at Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle, Zubamendi at Real Sociedad. The problem that they've got with Guimaraes is that the money that Newcastle are asking for or would want is City considered to be out of their price range. Zubamendi is an interesting one. Obviously everyone will know that he was linked with Liverpool in the summer. Again, City have looked at him. The issue though with him is that City see him as a Rodri copy. And while that would be great for 6 months because it gets you through the second half of the season, he's 25 years old. So what do you do? If you're going to give him a sort of 5-year contract, what do you do beyond the end of the season when Rodri, you assume, is back and fit again? You can't have him sat on the bench. So there is an issue with him there. The one they like is Edison at Atalanta. Now, again, there are issues about whether they can get him out of Atalanta mid-season. Atalanta are top of Serie A. They're, I think, 13th in the Champions League table, so well within range of making the knockout round. So why would he want to move mid-season? While City are sort of saying that they are going to try and look, and it's obvious there's a huge hole in the centre of City's midfield. And at the moment, Pep Guardiola is trying to fill that with Kovacic. That's not his natural position. And Gundogan, again, not really his natural position. And also it's a shadow of the player who left and went to Barcelona and just hasn't reached the level since he's been back at City. So while City are expected to make proper attempts to sign a number 6, it's not a foregone conclusion. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about the January window all the way through this podcast, but it is, I'm sure fans are sick of hearing it. It is a really, really tough window to operate in, and I'm sure that we've all been told the same by the clubs that we cover. It's all well and good City wanting to do stuff. It's how you do it in January. It's a really, really tough window to work in.
I think there's a bit of managing expectations there as well, because you're right, clubs always bang that drum that it's going to be tough in January, but I think this January is a little bit different to others, that a lot of clubs do need people in, whether it's because of the amount of games that they're having to play, the injuries that a lot of clubs have suffered. But from City's perspective, yeah, Rob's right. I mean, those names are the ones that we're hearing, and each one is very difficult. I think Zubamendi is difficult because we know that getting players out of the Basque club Sociedad Bilbao is very difficult because of the favourable tax regime they have over there. But I've also heard that, obviously, we know that Liverpool have got an interest in Zubamendi. Again, that is something that is unlikely to happen unless Real Sociedad suddenly say he's available. But also Real Madrid, they're keen as well in the summer. So you potentially have Zubamendi with a choice of Man City, Liverpool and Real Madrid. And right now, as attractive as Man City would be from a financial perspective in terms of wages, would you risk what may happen down the line with the Premier League charges that City could be hit with, a points deduction, a fine? They may be at the Champions League next season, even worse, when in the summer you could go to Liverpool or Real Madrid. So that is an issue that City have to address. And I think, people at the club will say, it's not an issue, they'll get people in, but big players will have other options. And Man City, yes, they can pay massive wages, but it's not as attractive as it should be because of what is coming down the line, potentially coming down the line. Bruno Guimaraes is saying, a month ago, Newcastle were in a bit of turmoil, but now, they're pushing for top 4 again. They're in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. They've got, they've avoided Liverpool in the draw. They've got Arsenal, which Arsenal hit a little bit of a tricky situation with injuries as well. So they could be in a cup final in 6 weeks. So Newcastle aren't going to be rushing to sell Bruno Guimaraes. So City's targets are not as gettable as they could be. They're no longer the superpower in the transfer market because of what's happened off the pitch. Now, also, that people might question this idea that players won't want to sign for City at the moment. Well, the last outfield player that they signed on a new contract was Kyle Walker in September 2023. None of their big guns have signed a new contract since. They've got a lot of players coming up for contract renewals. For whatever reason, these players are signing new contracts. Why is that? Is it because they're not sure themselves? Are their agents advising them not to go there right now? So City have got some obstacles to overcome, but the one thing that is in their favour, they've got a lot of money, a lot of cash to spend because they've made massive profits over the last couple of years in transfers, outgoing transfers in terms of players they've let go.
Now, Mark, you stole an idea from me that I put on this podcast a few weeks ago about the number of Man City players now flourishing elsewhere, other clubs. Obviously, Cole Palmer, Romeo Lavia. There are quite a few. Do either of you think that this recent downturn in form for City will mean that they might look to do things differently in the future in terms of trying to give these academy graduates a clearer path to the first team?
Well, I think they need to. I think, people look at Phil Foden as the example of Man City producing a great homegrown player, giving him time to develop, and that's what he did under Guardiola, to the point at times people saying, when is Foden going to play? But I'm just going to read a list of players that have come through the ranks or been at Man City's younger element since Guardiola arrived at the club and since left. So you mentioned Cole Palmer, Lavia, Morgan Rogers, Jadon Sancho, Taylor Howard-Bellis, Pedro Porro, Tosin Adarabio, Michael Olise, Liam Delap, Eric Garcia, James Trafford, David Brooks, Brahim Diaz, Alex Garcia, Felix Nemecha. Now, I'm not saying all those players would make a difference right now, but had City shown a bit more patience with some of those players and not moved them on, then they would be now forming part of the backbone of the team that could be the next Man City team. Now, I can't recall any situation where a club like Man United or Liverpool or Arsenal have developed homegrown players and let them go, the good ones. Liverpool were patient with Gerrard, Michael McManaman, and Arsenal with Bukayo Saka. United, the class of 92, many others since. City have let them go a bit too soon. They haven't shown the patience to develop the likes of Cole Palmer, Morgan Rogers. Morgan Rogers left at the same time as Cole Palmer. Went to Middlesbrough, 6 months later was at Aston Villa. So now he's an England player. I think City have either decided that they don't want to be patient with these players because they can get players off the top shelf and put them straight into the team, or they haven't spotted their potential. I'm not quite sure what's worse there, the lack of patience or the lack of foresight. But they basically strengthened their rivals by letting these players go. Yes, they brought a lot of money in, over £400 million over the years by selling products, but City got the best youth academy bar none anywhere in the world right now. No other club is producing players like that, and they will produce more, but they're going to have to be more patient. They're going to have to give these players time, because by not doing that, they're missing out on the next generation of the Man City team.
I mean, there's two things I'd like to add to that. One is that PSR is obviously a factor. Every club now knows the fastest route to profit is to sell their academy graduates. I mean, that's true across the board. Also, is there not something here about just the way that Pep Guardiola works? He likes to have a smaller group. That he doesn't, I know that the schedule doesn't really allow for this now, but the idea that he doesn't want 25, he wants, say, 18, 20 players that he works with, and he rotates 2 or 3 maybe every game, keeps everyone fresh, uses a tight group. I think it's an interesting comparison actually with, obviously everyone talks about Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola, and obviously the fact that they work together and they share a lot of the similar ideas, good friends. But I know that there was a lot of pressure. There was some pressure on Arteta in the summer internally at Arsenal to start giving some of the academy guys a bit more of a chance, because, of course, Chido Obi Martin left Arsenal and joined Manchester United. And they lost 1 or 2 others who didn't really see a path to the first team. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing someone like Miles Lewis-Skelly playing left back at the moment, when, normally you might see Zinchenko fill in there. Calafiori's actually back fit, and Lewis Skelly started the other night. Kieran Tierney's back and available, and yet he's also struggled to get game time, and Lewis Skelly's been entrusted with that. You've seen Ethan Nwaneri come through a little bit more at Arsenal this season, and I think Arteta's responded to that internal pressure to actually give some of these academy players the chance to see that there is a pathway. Rob, do you think that maybe Pep's coming under a little bit of that at City?
It's possible. And Mark is right that they have an awful lot of players who they could give opportunities to. And they do like, when they get players coming through, and the latest is probably Rico Lewis, who, for the first time this season has been a genuine regular. They do like to kind of bang that drum about how good they are at producing players and promoting players into that first team. Obviously, that, you're right, that relies on Pep Guardiola, who ultimately has the final say. A, liking the player, and B, finding opportunities for that player to play. The only thing I would add is that I would put a lot of what's happened to City down to the individual players, because it's fair enough to say that the club need to have a little bit more patience, but also there have been cases where the players need to show that same patience too. And there were instances throughout sort of Phil Foden's career at City where it looked like he would have to move because he just wasn't getting the minutes. And he decided, for whatever reason at the time, to sign new contracts and to stay where he was, even though there was an awful lot of interest from other clubs and he could have moved. He decided to stick it out and he wanted to stay. And he went through season after season when he barely played. And I think there are instances, particularly with the likes of Cole Palmer, Romeo Lavia. Now, obviously, it's the club's decision ultimately to sell those players because they're under contract. But also, Pep Guardiola doesn't like to keep players who have indicated in any way that they don't want to be there. So the minute that someone like Cole Palmer or Lavia or Morgan Rogers sort of says, well, I'm not getting enough opportunity here, I want to go and prove myself, the immediate answer from City is yes, because they just don't want a player there who doesn't want to be there. And they've shown that, whether it's an academy player or a first-team squad member, unless you're Bernardo Silva, who's never allowed to leave ever. Everyone else is allowed to go. And
that's because also, Rob, that's because that City had known for a long time they could just go out and buy somebody. And that's what they've always done. And I think that's the problem that they've hit.
But added to that, we did an academy feature on City earlier in the season, and we had Oscar Bob speaking as part of that. And one of the most interesting things that he said was that, there is a danger about, as a young player, signing for City at all. I mean, he came from Norway and moved to City. He said that his friends at the time said, why are you going to City? You're just not going to get the opportunities. And it was him who said, in the face of pressure from his parents, from his agents, from his friends, who said, no, I'm going to go there and I'm going to really try and break into that team. And he said there were instances again, when they signed players like, Jeremy Doku, and people were saying, well, why are you sticking at City? You're just not going to play. And he said, no, I'm going to stay. I want to work under Guardiola. I'm going to get my opportunity. And this summer, for the first time, looked like he was going to be a first-team regular. Obviously, it's not really worked out because he's had a bad injury and he's only just kind of coming out. But he had to show himself an awful lot of patience to get that opportunity, because you're right, Mark, it's really, really hard. There are very few clubs in the world who can, on a whim, just go out and buy whoever they want. You're talking about probably two clubs, maybe City and possibly Real Madrid, who can go and do it whenever they want. And that, for a young player, is really, really daunting.
Well, across town, Manchester United, I think they featured quite heavily in your piece, Mark, about the potential January transfers that could happen. What are you guys hearing about? I mean, I know Ruben Amorim probably would want to change all 25, wouldn't he, if he had the option? But I mean, what's realistic for them this month?
Well, they have to be quite conservative and limited to 3 players that might leave Man United next month. But, I think that's probably wishful thinking. I think they have a season to get through. They've got players that they need to get to the end of the season. But I think the key one is Marcus Rashford, obviously. He was on the bench against Newcastle. He was on the bench against Newcastle on Monday night. Didn't get off the bench. And that was quite telling, because United were chasing the game and they needed a goal, and Ruben Amorim put him in. Now, I've been told this morning, actually, that, despite the fact that Marcus Rashford appears to have been frozen out, there is still a way back, and that he's still being very professional around the club, and it's not a Jadon Sancho situation, but it doesn't look like there's a future there for him. So it's clear that if United were to get an offer for Marcus Rashford, they would take it if it was anywhere close to what they deem valuable in terms of his value, whether that's a loan or a permanent transfer, because while he's there and not playing, he's just draining the wage bill and becoming an off-field distraction. But as we've discussed this before, finding somebody to take Marcus Rashford on a 3.5-year contract, £350,000 a week, thereabouts, it's going to be really tough, especially if he's not playing very well. That's the key, that his form doesn't justify anybody coming close to that. The other ones, Anthony, again, Anthony's been a bad buy from day one. He's only on quite small wages, a small basic wage, around £70,000 a week, I'm told. So United could find a club interested in that in terms of paying his wages on loan. Again, who'd want to take him on loan? Maybe clubs in Turkey, perhaps. And Casemiro, he struggled against Newcastle on Monday night. He's struggled for a long time now. He's got 18 months left in his contract. If they leave it too much longer, Man United risk getting nothing from him in 18 months' time. So that is a player they would listen to offers for. I mean, the players that are also, out of contracts in the summer, Victor Lindelof, Harry Maguire. There's a lot of potential churn at United, but ultimately, I don't think it's going to be a busy window at United because they haven't got any money to spend. The only way that they can do business is getting people off the wage bill and maybe getting some fees. But Rob will know that is going to be, as we've said before, January is quite a hard window for lots of reasons.
Robert, are they? Do you think United are prepared to take big hit on players? Are they at the point where? And I'm sort of linking this back to Arsenal to some extent into what they did when they knew they had to get rid of someone. They kind of paid them off to leave. But are they at the point where they're accepting that the market values that they pay for these players they don't exist? They were wrong. They're not there now. Or are they thinking, actually, we'll keep our powder dry in terms of selling as well, to hope that we have more of a market for these players in the summer?
Yeah, I mean, Mark is right that financially, the margins that United are working with are really, really tight. They're kind of downplaying the suggestion that I think there's been sort of stories out that they're kind of within sort of 2 million of their PSR margin. United are playing that down a little bit because they're sort of saying, well, the people who are making these calculations don't have access to the numbers that are given to the Premier League, the PLC numbers, are different to the numbers that you have to give to the Premier League. So, it's maybe not that tight, but they are sort of debating the fact that it is, close, and that there isn't a lot of money to work with because of that. And to go back to your original question, they are prepared to be quite flexible. Now, maybe 18 months ago, it would be unthinkable that United would entertain a loan offer, say, for Marcus Rashford. Now, the message from United now is that is maybe something that they would have to look at if they're hoping to give themselves some wiggle room in terms of bringing players in. Now, if you could, get a loan fee for Marcus Rashford around sort of 4 or 5 million. Now, Marcus Rashford is worth more than 4 or 5 million pounds. But if you could maybe negotiate a loan to the end of the season, have him go somewhere else, maybe sort of reinvigorate himself, and also bring in 5 million quid, that then you could go and do your own loan deal to bring someone else in, maybe a left wing back, which is a massive need for Man United. For the first time, there are people at United who are sort of suggesting that they are willing to look at that. And that would go for a lot of the names that Mark has just mentioned there. Anthony, Casemiro. No one is going to come in with an £80 million bid for Anthony. I would suggest that no one's going to come in with a £20 million bid for Anthony, because he's just not anywhere near that level. He's shown himself to be nowhere near that level of player. But if there was a team that came in and said, look, we'll pay half of his wages possibly and give you 2 million, that is something that United are going to look at, because the finances are that tight that they need to make money wherever they possibly can. The one thing I would say, and again, it's a message from Man United, is that January will also tell them a lot about how many more games they've got to play for the rest of the season. They've got an FA Cup tie at Arsenal that I imagine everyone thinks they're going to lose given current form. So if you go out of the FA Cup, you're not going to have any kind of cup run. So all the sort of fringe players there won't get games. Again, with the Europa League, you'll know by the end of January how many Europa League games you're going to play between now and the end of the season. Are you going to have to play that that's first knockout game, that extra 2 games, if you finish outside the top 8? Are you actually going to qualify at all? I mean, it looks like United are. So there are going to be Europa League games, but that will, again, determine how many players Amorim thinks that he needs to carry him through to the end of the season. And it's possible that if United go out against Arsenal, that the likes of Lindelof, Eriksen, Rashford, Casemiro, Anthony, even Bayern, all of them really, they're just not going to play. So again, you may look at deals that perhaps you wouldn't have done a year ago, A, because of the finances, and B, because there just aren't going to be enough games to go around.
I think you could probably add Joshua Zirkzee to that list as well, because of what happened against Newcastle on Monday, the fact that the manner of his substitution and the treatment at the hands of the fans. I know there's been a bit of a lot of people are trying to kind of, show some sympathy for what happened, but obviously we know that he was substituted on 31 minutes and the fans cheered him going off, and he went down to the tunnel, to the dressing room, came back. But he's had a difficult time at United since signing from Bologna, a £35 million deal. But there's been a lot of speculation that Juventus are quite keen that they're taking him back to Italy. His reputation is still quite strong in Italy, so that would be a real admission of defeat if United were to let Zirkzee go back to Italy. But I think the situation is quite a unique one there because of what happened against Newcastle and the way it turned out for him recently. But we're just flipping to you, James, in London. Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham all look like they could do something. I think Hans Postecoglou has already said that Spurs are already lining up deals, and Chelsea obviously see every window as an opportunity. So what you're hearing, is there any chance of any decent deals happening in London this window? Yeah,
I think there's certainly ambition to do it more than I can remember in recent years, actually, across those 3 clubs. We start with Tottenham. I mean, the issue that they've got is that it's a case of whether they either look at what they need now or what they're trying to build towards in the longer term, because they are two different things. You go back sort of 3 or 4 weeks, Postecoglou's on record saying that he feels that they need to strengthen 1, maybe 2 attacking positions over the course of the next sort of year or so, because he just felt they Richarlison not always consistently available, and then when he's fit, he's not always reliable in front of goal. Obviously, Heung-min Son has been a fantastic player for Spurs, not quite the player perhaps that he was, who's certainly in a bit of a slumping form in any case at the moment. There's obviously question marks about his contract situation, given that there's some uncertainty there. So they're looking, and they have been for a while, at attacking options, but actually it's at centre-back and really left-sided of their defence, the left-back and left-sided centre-half, that is really the issue for them this month. But again, to repeat really what's been said about the other clubs, it does come into play about who can you really get in this window. I think they'll be looking more at squad depth rather than trying to sign players that would improve the first team when everyone's fit this month. If you think about, so a couple of their longer term centre back targets, Gonzalo Inacio at Sporting Lisbon, and Milan Skriniar at Paris Saint-Germain. It's difficult to see either of those being allowed to leave in January. So, again, you're in that sort of conundrum of, well, do you compromise and try and get someone in that you're not entirely sure about this month because you can, or do you wait and risk exacerbating the injury problems that they've already got? So that's kind of where Spurs are. For Arsenal, it's one of those situations where they kept their powder dry in the summer in terms of trying to sign another attacking player. When they went out of the Champions League to Bayern Munich, the word from the hierarchy then was, we need one more. We need one more, whether it's at 9, whether it's a wide forward who can play as a 9, but we need one more. And they decided when Benjamin Sesko signed a new contract to Red Bull Leipzig that they keep their powder dry and wait. There is a feeling at Arsenal that they might be able to get him next summer. I can't see that happening in January, but of course we never know if a club comes in with a big enough money and Red Bull decide that they want to do a deal, then things can change. But the injury obviously to Bukayo Saka, and then off the back of that, Sterling, although apparently that's not as bad as first feared, has just left them feeling, I think, what they already knew is that they're a little bit short in those attacking positions, and maybe if they can get one more in, then they would do that this month.
James, just jump in there on Arsenal, on your forward, because we know that Arsenal need a centre forward. It's been a long-term thing, and they're going to have to spend a lot of money to do it. Now, if the situation arose where Alexander Isak, for instance, is having a great season at Newcastle, Eddie Howe said just last month that they can't offer him a new contract at the moment because of the club's PSR situation. So Isak is out a new deal. The fact that Newcastle have got issues with PSR themselves, would Arsenal have the finances or the confidence to make a move to someone like Isak, or is it a case of just waiting to the summer because Isak, Gyökeres are just too expensive to do right now?
I don't think. Okay, so Gyökeres is easier to deal with because I'm not sure they're that keen on Gyökeres. I know that there's been a lot written about that, and they've certainly scouted him, and he's certainly on their list, if you like. But I think he's quite a long way down that list. And if you're talking about the kind of money that we are, I don't think you can go to sort of your third or fourth option on that list for that money. So I think that deals with him. Isak's a bit different. They do like him, and they have scouted him for quite a long time. I heard a number, 150 million has been quoted for him this month. I don't think Arsenal could do that deal. I don't think there are many clubs in the world that could do that, but I don't think Arsenal could do that this month. Could they find an agreement closer to 100 million and find the money to do that? Yeah, I think they probably do have the scope to do that if they really wanted to push the boat out. But of course, there is this other situation with Arsenal at the moment, which is that they don't have a sporting director. Jason Ato is the sort of acting interim sporting director, and he's stepped up and he's very highly rated. Everybody you speak to at London Colney sort of talks about this guy in really glowing terms, but he doesn't have the experience of acting sort of in a big window on his own, leading a transfer of that size. So there is a little bit of uncertainty about whether Arsenal possess the expertise to get a deal like that over the line this month, especially when you consider that they are also looking for a sporting director. Mikel Arteta is involved in that, but he's the head coach, but the guy who's coming in should be his boss. It's all a bit odd. So, yeah, I think the odds are against it. Let's put it that way.
And again, just chucking an area because it's been doing the rounds. It does seem quite unlikely, but Marcus Rashford has been linked with Arsenal a little bit. Now, it would potentially solve a short-term problem with Saka being out, but obviously Marcus Rashford has baggage. Would Man United deal with Arsenal? Well, is it a deal that could suit both parties, or is it one to forget about completely?
It's one that I think would have made sense to some extent had they not already taken a gamble on a winger who was out of form and looking to kickstart himself in Raheem Sterling, because that's not gone very well. You know, Sterling really, there have been so many games where we've been looking at the bench thinking, well, he's got to bring Sterling on for at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, give it. And he doesn't seem to trust him at the moment, whether what he's seeing in training isn't enough, or whether he's been carrying that knee problem that we now know he has for a while. Whatever it may be, the Raheem Sterling deal's not worked out. So I think to gamble on another one, on another kind of potential winger who used to be good and, maybe he could come good again and let's give him an opportunity, it just feels like a step too far. But look, if they get right to the end of the window, and this is what happened with Sterling, even on deadline day morning in the summer, they were done. They'd finished it. But the offer came in from Chelsea to say, look, the numbers are so inviting that they decided to take a punt. So you couldn't rule it out entirely, but I think having done the Sterling deal, you can't really see them going again down that path with a Rashford.
The one thing I'd add on that is that United are certainly not ruling out the possibility that they would do a deal with another English club for Rashford. And I know that lots of Man United fans may look at that and think, well, that's just crazy, because why would you want to strengthen a rival? But ultimately, United haven't really got rivals in the top six at the moment because where they are in the table. So United certainly aren't ruling out the possibility that they could, talk to Arsenal or Chelsea. What they won't do, they've said, is a Sterling to Arsenal type deal where, as I understand it, James, you'll know more than me, but Chelsea are still paying the overwhelming majority of those wages. So United wouldn't do a deal in that sense. They wouldn't have a situation where they were paying Marcus Rashford 90% of his wages to play for Arsenal or Chelsea. But certainly there is a willingness to talk to those clubs or clubs in the Premier League if that's the best option for Rashford. It's certainly not one of those situations where they're just flat out ruling out that he can play for another English club and they want to do a deal with Spain or a club in Saudi Arabia.
It's hard to see where his market is actually, Rashford. I mean, I put Rashford to Postecoglou a few weeks ago. And he's sort of, he's quite dismissive of the idea of signing him. To Tottenham would make more sense to me, really, because I think that they, as we've already established, they need to bolster those attacking options. It's something that they feel they need to do in the longer term, and they could kind of take a gamble on Rashford, really. They're in a better position to do that, I think. They've got players, like Timo Werner, who've not really kicked on. Lucas Bergvall is young, not really sure what we're going to see from him. I could see Rashford, particularly given that he could play as a 9 potentially as well. And I know that's another debate, and United probably don't feel that he could, but there's certainly the versatility there to occupy those two positions. It would make sense to me, but Spurs are very much playing it down. And just finally to touch on Chelsea, I just think, I think from their point of view, they've obviously done such a large amount of business in the last 3 or 4 windows that I can't see them doing anything major. They may look to try and again add 1 or 2 of the youngsters to the longer term sort of game plan that they have. But I think it's kind of outgoings really. There's still quite a few members of the so-called bomb squad, the group of players that were exiled and sort of told that that you have no future. There's sort of Ben Chilwell, there's Keita Dyers in there as well. Chukwuemeka is another one who will probably go. So, there are outgoings, I think, are the priority for Chelsea this month.